Al Capone was the most feared man in America. His name alone could shut down streets, silence witnesses, and make powerful men tremble. He ruled Chicago with bullets, money, and absolute control. Politicians bowed to him, police officers worked for him, and rival gangsters either joined him or disappeared. To the public, he was a monster. To his enemies, he was a death sentence. But behind the violence, the tailored suits, and the machine guns, Al Capone had something the world rarely talks about: a son. And unlike his father, this boy didn't grow up to rule an empire. Instead, his life became one of the quietest, strangest, and most tragic stories connected to the American Mafia. Before we go any further, subscribe now. Because stories like this don't show up in textbooks, and the next one might be even darker. Al Capone's son was born into a world of wealth, fear, and secrecy. His name was Albert Francis Capone, but everyone in the family called him Sonny. He was born on December 4, 1918, at the exact moment his father's power was beginning to explode. America was deep into Prohibition, and Al Capone was quickly becoming the most powerful criminal in the country. Bootlegging operations stretched across Chicago. Speakeasies operated openly. Money flowed in faster than it could be counted. Violence was constant. But none of that mattered to Sonny. To him, Al Capone wasn't a kingpin. He was simply his father. From the outside, Sonny's childhood looked like a dream. He lived in expensive homes guarded day and night. He rode in chauffeured cars. He never lacked food, clothing, or comfort. While other children scraped their knees on city streets, Sonny played behind gates. While other families struggled through the Great Depression, Sonny's household never felt hunger. But that luxury came with a price: isolation. Sonny couldn't go anywhere without protection. He couldn't make friends easily. And he couldn't escape the fear that surrounded his family like a permanent shadow. Al Capone loved his son in a way that surprised even the most hardened gangsters around him. Men who had seen Capone order executions watched him soften completely around Sonny. He smiled differently. He spoke gently. He worried constantly. Sonny was the one thing in Capone's life that money and violence couldn't control, and that terrified him. Then came the illness. At a young age, Sonny fell seriously sick. Doctors later believed it was scarlet fever or a related infection, but the damage was permanent. Sonny was left partially deaf. In the brutal world Al Capone ruled, weakness was fatal. And for the first time in his life, Capone felt truly powerless. No amount of money could undo what had happened to his son. Capone became obsessed with protecting him. He hired private doctors. He limited visitors. He moved his family repeatedly. He feared kidnapping more than prison, assassination more than rival gangs. Sonny wasn't just his child, he was his vulnerability. As Sonny grew quieter, Al Capone grew more violent. The late 1920s were the bloodiest years of Capone's reign. The St. Valentine's Day massacre cemented his reputation as a butcher. 7 men were executed in cold blood. The public turned against him. Newspapers ran his name daily. Federal agents watched his every move. And while Capone expanded his empire, the walls were closing in. In 1931, the government finally got him, not for murder, not for racketeering, but for tax evasion. Al Capone, the most feared man in America, was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. Overnight, his empire began to crumble. And Sonny's life changed forever. With Capone behind bars, Sonny and his mother May vanished from public view. May Capone understood something her husband never fully accepted, that survival meant disappearing. She moved Sonny from place to place, changed routines, avoided attention. She wanted her son to grow up normal, even if the world would never let him. Meanwhile, Al Capone's mind was collapsing. Years earlier, Capone had contracted syphilis, an untreated infection that slowly attacked his brain. In prison, the disease progressed rapidly. Guards noticed changes. He became forgetful. Confused. Childlike. The once brilliant strategist struggled to hold conversations. By the time he was transferred to Alcatraz, the legend of Al Capone was already fading. Sonny saw his father not as history remembers him, but as a man falling apart. When Capone was released in 1939, he was unrecognizable. His empire was gone. His power was gone. His intelligence was fading. He spent his days in Florida, fishing, wandering, replaying memories that no longer connected properly. Sonny watched his father disappear piece by piece. It broke something inside him. Unlike the sons of many mob bosses who chased legacy and power, Sonny wanted nothing to do with crime. He hated the attention. He hated the fear. He hated the name Capone. It wasn't a symbol of strength to him, it was a curse. So he made a decision that shocked everyone who knew his history. He erased himself. Sonny Capone legally changed his name to Albert Francis Brown. It wasn't a disguise. It was an escape. He didn't want power. He didn't want respect. He wanted invisibility. No guns. No bodyguards. No blood money. Just a quiet life. But a name like Capone doesn't disappear easily. Even after changing his identity, Sonny struggled. Employers sensed something off. Neighbors whispered. Anxiety followed him everywhere. He lived with constant fear of recognition. Some reports suggest he suffered from depression and chronic stress for much of his life. He married, divorced, remarried. He worked ordinary jobs. He never committed a crime. He never gave interviews. He never cashed in on his father's legacy. That silence was his rebellion. When Al Capone died in 1947, Sonny didn't step into the spotlight. There were no memoirs. No documentaries. No dramatic confessions. Just quiet grief. The most powerful gangster in American history died, and his son made sure the story ended there. Sonny spent his remaining years far from Chicago, far from gangsters, far from history. He lived in California. He avoided attention. He avoided questions. He avoided the past. And in 2004, at the age of 85, Albert Francis Brown, once known as Sonny Capone, died quietly. No empire. No headlines. No blood. Just a man who survived the world his father created. And maybe that's the most powerful ending of all. Because while Al Capone ruled America through fear, his son chose obscurity. While Capone's name became immortal, Sonny made sure it died with him. This isn't just the story of a gangster's son. It's the story of the true cost of power. Of how empires built on violence poison everything they touch. Of how sometimes the greatest act of strength isn't taking the throne, it's walking away from it forever. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think, if you want more real gangster stories that reveal what happens after the headlines fade, after the power is gone, after the legend collapses, then you already know what to do.